And we are alive. Today I have with me James Tatum. How are you doing, James?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. And I'm sure most people are familiar with you from the time you spent at MDUSA, where you kind of developed into the world-class lifter you are today. I mean, you won national titles, competed on an international platform, and to me, the most impressive feat is snatching double body weight. Um, and I'm sure we'll get to all of that eventually, but maybe we can rewind a bit to the point where you first started weight training. So I'm a little birdie told me you were a power lifter before you started weightlifting. Is that correct?
Yeah. I started powerlifting in high school, and I was never that great at it, but I did it.
So like before you got into weightlifting, what were your numbers on like the squat, bench, and deadlift? Just to give us an idea of like what your general strength levels were.
Um, so I think my best competition total, I don't remember exactly what the weight classes were back then. I think it was like an 82.5 kilo weight class.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I squatted 205. I bench pressed 150, and I deadlifted 265.
Okay, those are reasonable numbers. And then from that point, you kind of started competing in weightlifting. I remember there's like a really old throwback video where you were competing before you went to MDUSA. So maybe you can
Yeah.
kind of just give us an idea of what your experiences were like weightlifting before that, and then your time at MDUSA, and then we'll kind of dive into how all of that has influenced your training and coaching now.
Yeah, so pretty much what we did, we did powerlifting for about 8 years. A lot of guys that I went to high school with, uh, we all did that all the way through, all year round. Used it for sports performance, for wrestling, and all the other little sports that everyone else ended up doing. And then when I was in college, a lot of them went off. Like I think we all went to school together too, up in college, and they all went off and went somewhere else. And so then I kind of got stuck with no training partners, and doing powerlifting by yourself is pretty boring. So that's kind of like what brought me into like the idea of trying something else out. I was also coaching at a sports performance place. We were actually in an MMA gym. So we did a lot of work with MMA fighters and things like that, and so there was like a couple of reasons that were drawn. Like I was drawn towards the sport of weightlifting. One, my squat, based on those numbers I told you a little while ago, you could tell that it was 60 kilos less than my deadlift, which is pretty bad. So I thought weightlifting would help my squat out. Also, and then just learning something new to be a better coach, because I was thinking of going into, being a strength coach at that time. I was in school for exercise science, and so I thought, all right, I'll try something else out. Powerlifting by myself is boring. This seems like fun. So I ended up going to a 6-week weightlifting course at like a CrossFit, where it was just like once a week you come in and you train. And then there was a competition at the end. And so I did that for 6 weeks, did the competition, and then I was hooked after that first competition, because, just the excitement of the weightlifting competition was a lot of fun. Powerlifting meets are they're fun, but they're long. Like this, an all-day ordeal. They're exhausting. And like by the end, you're like, why did I ever do that? I imagine that's kind of how like maybe marathon runners feel. So weightlifting, a couple hours up on stage, the excitement of being on stage, and the unpredictability, well, a moderate amount of unpredictability of weightlifting, it just made it so much more exciting.
Yeah, I don't know
So
if a lot of people have like a similar experience with powerlifting, but like the people I've coached, when they go into a powerlifting meet, they know what they can hit, and then they go out to hit those numbers. It's not so much competing against other lifters, whereas weightlifting, it really is just about medaling. Like, you go in with numbers you want to hit, but if lower numbers will get you on the platform or on the podium, you'll hit those numbers instead. So I think it's more influenced by the competition, which makes it a little more fun.
Yeah, it's a little bit more of a chess game and strategy in the back. You know, even just the way that powerlifting meets are set up, I mean, makes it a little bit more predictable. You know, you got the three waves. The bar starts low and it goes up 3 times in a row. Or weightlifting, you know, you could be out in 2 minutes.
Right.
Or 1 minute. Somebody cuts the clock off on you. But yeah, so that, I don't know, it seems more exciting in that respect too. So I like that a lot more. I enjoyed powerlifting. You know, it sounds like I'm kind of talking down on powerlifting, but I did have a lot of fun with powerlifting.
And then, so after you did that initial weightlifting trial period, is that when you tried out for MDUSA?
No, so I did that first one, and then then I enjoyed it, and then I started kind of looking into it. And I don't remember exactly when I wrote all of my goals, but I wrote down like what I wanted to achieve. You know, I can't. I think my goals were to find training partners, get good weightlifting equipment, and find a coach. And this was like 2011 in North Carolina, and weightlifting is a little bit bigger here on the East Coast now, but for the longest time, like there was nobody. I mean, there was Team Georgia, which like the Cohens, and then there was like stuff up in Pennsylvania, and like a few scattered ones down in Florida, and like that was it. You know, the closest coach for me was like over 8 hours away, which was kind of unrealistic. So I kept trying to do those. Like I was living on the coast of North Carolina in Wilmington, and I kept trying to like make those goals work for me down in Wilmington. And I couldn't find any consistent training partners. I know a lot of people probably have this issue. You know, I'd get some people, they train for a couple of weeks and then they'd go and they do something else, or they couldn't make the training times, you know, the normal college student training partners. And so I ended up, Glenn announced that he was moving from Cal Strength to Fort Mill, South Carolina, and that they were starting a team and doing the tryouts. And, you know, like I saw that and I was like, whoa, that's perfect. I get a coach, I get training partners, and I get to use good equipment, good weightlifting equipment. Because I was snatching on powerlifting bars, and that's not a pleasant experience. So when I went to the competition was like the first time I actually used a weightlifting bar, and just the feel is so much easier, and it makes the lift even easier because the bar spins. You know, you got a good amount of whip. Or powerlifting bar I was on was pretty stiff. The knurling was not conducive for snatches and clean and jerks. So, I was pretty excited about it. And so then I'd already competed in my first nationals at that point. And then I just went out and tried out.
Okay. So
I think,
go ahead.
Glenn thought I was like, I think I was, I don't know, maybe 20, maybe 24 at the time. Glenn thought I was about 35, and he was like, oh, I don't know, you're a little old. Yeah, it was a fun time.
So I've had Tom Stroke on the podcast, and I'm always interested to hear, as someone that hasn't had the opportunity, but what was it like training full-time as a weightlifter and having that schedule where it was 2-a-day practices, sometimes 3, because that's got to be tough to adapt to. And then having weightlifting as kind of like your day job, I guess you would say. How was that whole experience for you?
It was definitely fun. So I'd been training powerlifting and in sports performance for a good 8 years before that. And then weightlifting on my own for about a year before I started working with Glenn. But the funny thing about it is I wasn't big in, like, I hadn't really like followed many weightlifting programs. I kind of dabbled in a little bit of Catalyst stuff because he always provides a lot of good stuff out there for free. But I didn't really get into the weightlifting. I don't know. It's like I programmed my snatches and clean and jerks how a strength coach would program, not a weightlifting coach. And so the biggest difference was, once you go all 100% into weightlifting, you break some of those rules, like those general principles that like a strength coach would have in a weight training program by, I don't know, squatting every day or snatching. You don't have 5 days of recovery from when you do hamstring work to when you do hamstring work again. Like there's, it's just all at once, super high volume. So that was kind of an interesting transition, like, push into, how Glenn programs, and a lot of other weightlifters. But, I had done 2-a-day training sessions. I was actually, just being young, athletic and all of that, I adapted pretty well to the training volume. There were some shocks, like, my squat actually suffered for quite a while before it actually finally kind of came around and came back up. Never doing pulls, it's all, well, we do some pulls, but we never go like heavy deadlifts. We'd always do like, around 100 to, 115% of your lifts. So it was just a different stimulus. But living where you just, you train and you don't do anything else. I mean, it's pretty fun. You make a lot of really quick progress. I ended up getting like a job because it was me and my wife. We were newly married and we moved to Fort Mill. She had just graduated college. I'd been out for like 6 months. She didn't have a job, and I made a stipend for like $400 for muscle driver. So we moved with making $400 a month to Charlotte. I had to get Glenn to write me a letterhead saying that he pays me like $1,200 so that we could actually get an apartment and live in it. But yeah, that was kind of interesting, Charlotte was a little bit cheaper at that time, but that was one of the harder parts. I mean, people still you still got stipends, but yeah, especially with 2 people moving into a new city with no, she didn't have a job yet. It was like eating dollar pizzas from Walmart for dinner, like that kind of stuff. But once we got settled, she got a job. Things kind of settled down a little bit. I even got a job at a grocery store for a while, just because I needed to get some sort of job that was pretty flexible on hours. And just like standing for 20 hours a week at a grocery store and training 20, 25 hours a week at the gym, my squat went down again. Like you can't do both in that scenario. Like you can't, you got to have that other time where you're sitting down and relaxing if you're training that much. So there was definitely some like things that I had to change around. I didn't want to live on a second story apartment because I didn't want to walk up the stairs. And my wife didn't understand that. She didn't want to be on the bottom because people were, stomping around upstairs. But, little things like that you wouldn't think about normally were like big decisions for us.
So
Tom, speaking of Tom, he lived in in a townhouse that was like 4 stories tall, but it was so skinny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt bad for him.
So I guess that's kind of like a good segue to recovery. Like, what was your preferred method of, besides relaxing, because I think that's kind of a given, but like recovering from the tough workouts and then making sure that you were optimally recovered for every training session?
So back then when we first started, I really wasn't that. I wasn't doing all the ideal things to recover because one thing I didn't have much money. A muscle driver had a few things, like we got a horse trough once, and we did some ice baths there. But for the most part, I just did, the basics where I'd make sure I sleep. I sleep a lot. I didn't have kids then, so it was a lot easier to get over 8 hours of sleep, probably closer to 10 hours a night. And yeah, and then depending on how we were doing financially at the time was all dependent on how much food I would eat, or the quality of food. But once you could start eating like quality food, we kind of got into like crock pot food, and we had a lot of meat.
Yeah.
That made a big difference. Food and sleep were the biggest ones in the beginning. As I got older, my training age got a little bit more. I had to do a little bit more on the recovery side. But in the beginning, that was the focus.
Okay, so when you made the transition from 77 to 85, was that kind of like you felt like you had reached your limit at 77 and your body just needed to put on some extra muscle? Or was this kind of like you just felt like you were more competitive at 85? What was kind of the rationale for that decision?
So my best total was a 77, was in 2014 at the 2014 Nationals. I think I did 324, and my third attempt clean and jerk, the clock ran out on me because of a coaching mishap. So I didn't even get to take my third attempt, and I was feeling good that day. Like I felt like I probably could have even hit more. And that was in 2014, and I went 2 years. Well, maybe not a full 2 years, maybe a year and a half, where I didn't hit that total again in competition. I wasn't making jerks anymore. And so I was getting kind of frustrated. I was thinking I was going to stay a 77 throughout the whole quad and try to go for the 2016 Olympics as a 77. And I think what was happening was I was an 82.5 kilo powerlifter. And then when I started weightlifting, I've lost all the upper body mass, from bench pressing. So I lost a lot of weight, and I kind of fell into the 77 pretty good. But then as I kept weightlifting year after year, I'm starting to get, bigger quads, bigger glutes. So I had more weightlifting specific muscle mass. And eventually I just couldn't. I was dropping too much weight to get to 77, and then the weight cut was really what was killing me. So I didn't really have to gain a lot of weight. Like, we made the decision in 2016, and the beginning of 2016, we were like, okay, let's just try out a meet as an 85, because my totals, at this rate, I'm not even going to make the Olympic trials or something. So we did it, and I actually ended up having to cut weight to get to 85. It was only like a half a kilo, but like my body was like ready to be an 85. Like, I was about 3 months out of competition when I was at 77. I was weighing like 82, and then 2 weeks out of competition, or the morning of a competition, I'd be weighing 80 kilos, and then I'd cut the last 3 kilos the day of. So moving up to 85 took half a second. And then first competition as an 85, I hit all of the goals that I wanted to hit as a 77. I snatched 158, which would have been an American record as a 77, and I clean and jerked 185, which would have been an American record total at the time for a 77. At my first meet as an 85, so it was kind of refreshing because I was at 77, and I knew like I had that potential to hit these big weights as a 77, but I kept, for some reason or another, the weight cut, I just couldn't perform it. Couldn't do it in competition. And then once we kind of took that factor out, like it was kind of nice to see, wow, okay, I actually was, capable of these numbers. I just needed to move up and weight a little bit. I think I was just too skinny. I'd do a dip drive and the weight would bend me in half.
Mm-hmm.
I got to put a little bit of mass on, and that did it.
So did you notice a change or an increase in like your strength numbers? So deadlift, squat, push press when you moved up to the 85 class?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm trying to think about when I hit certain numbers. I didn't do a whole lot of deadlifting. I did a deadlift cycle when I was in 85 just because I was curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up deadlifting like 285 or something. So that definitely went up, and that's from like doing weightlifting and not even training the deadlifts, and it went up to 285. I think I snatch gripped 265, which was my old sumo powerlifting deadlift. So yeah, that definitely went up. My squat went from like 233 to 245, which is a decent increase. But as you could see, like just my squat is a little bit, it's always just a little bit lagging behind my pulling strength. As far as push press goes, I never really pushed the weights on my push press. So I think probably my best push press is still when I was a 77. I think I did 140 for a couple reps or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have this weight where I can get like a good feel for push press, and then I can feel like once if I know I can do this, and I think it's like 125. Like that's all I really need in the push press to be able to jerk 190. So,
jeez.
It's like that in overhead squats. Like I know if I can do an overhead squat at like 140, I have enough strength to hold 160 in a snatch. So they don't have a whole lot of carryover for me to really push those, but that's a kind of an individual thing.
Did you ever jerk out of a rack or jerk separately from clean and jerk?
Yeah, I have a hard time doing it. Jerks are way easier for me after a clean. I have to visualize, like if I pull it off of like some jerk blocks, I've got to visualize, like I've got to imagine that I just cleaned it and kind of trick my mind into thinking that I just cleaned this weight, and then I can do the jerk.
So kind of like looking at your leverages and how you're built as a weightlifter and kind of watching your lifting through those old videos, I'm kind of curious to hear what you think your strengths and weaknesses were as a weightlifter and how you went about correcting those weaknesses. Like for example, like I noticed that sometimes when you would catch a clean, like you might get pulled forward a little bit and have a hard time standing up. Like I kind of have a similar issue, so I'm interested in hearing how you approach fixing some of those like difficult aspects of the lift.
Yeah, so definite strength would be I've got a lot of power in the pull, and I think that's really what helps me out in the snatch. And then just the timing at the top, just knowing when to go under would definitely be a strength. For the clean, I actually have to think of slowing down my pull, because if I pull too fast, like the bar oscillates up by the time it gets to my knee. And And I used to catch the cleans, and then I would kind of like bend forward, and then I'd have to like extend my erectors or my spine back up and then stand up. And that kind of comes right back into that, that strength, me trying to rely on my back strength, rather than, let's say you do a clean, and then you're moving fast and you're going quickly under it. Your body's like, sometimes you can trick your body into it, but a lot of times your body's going to move to where it knows it's the most strongest, or it goes to the most rehearsed position, especially when you're attempting heavy weights. And for me, for the longest time, my body knew that my back was way stronger than my legs. So it was like, oh, we're going to catch it like this. And then there you go. I'm starting to catch it clean, and my elbows drop and I round, and it just looks terrible. So kind of what I had to do is I just had to get my legs stronger, and I had to get the feel for, like, when I was squatting, I would imagine the weight transferring through my spine into my legs and glutes, and then using those to come up. You see a lot of people, and they'll go down to the bottom, and then they come up, and the first thing that happens is they have that little shift back. A lot of times that little shift back is the knees extending really quick out of the bottom where they're strong, but because they don't want to put the load on the quads, they want to put the load on the back. So, we're really fighting to hold position for my squats, where I keep the knees, in line, and everything comes up in unison. You get a lot more quad and glute contribution in that squat. And so I had to do a lot of those, and I really had to drop my squat numbers way back down and let my legs and hips feel that weight more. And that gave me that made the squat more transferable over into the actual clean. So once I started doing that, I could start catching cleans, and then that weight would just transfer down into the legs, and I could stay upright, and my body started realizing, like, hey, I'm actually strong in this position, so we're going to go to the path of least resistance, which will be this new position where you're catching upright and that weight's going down into the legs. And that's kind of the journey that I had to do for that clean, and it took a while, especially, because we were competing a lot. So a lot of these, I only had so much time to work on these things before I had my next competition. But that was the biggest thing. And I think that's one of the faults of me being overly strong when I started weightlifting, and I started with no coach. A 6-week CrossFit course, you could that in 2011, you could say that's no coach. It wasn't until I got to Muscle Driver and actually working with Don McCauley, he's the one that really emphasized the squat for me. So catching like that.
Kind of at this point, maybe we'll backtrack a little bit. So, like, after you finished up at MDUSA, what was your journey from that point kind of to where we're at now, having your own gym and training under East Coast Gold?
Yeah, so after Muscle Driver closed, what was it, the beginning of 2016, about the same time that I moved up to an 85. The owner of Muscle Driver, not Glenn. Glenn owned like 5 or 10% near the end, but the other guy, Brad, he was left a bad taste in everyone's mouth, and everybody was sick of Brad. So being on a team kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So I was like, all right, I need a break. So from there, it was Travis and I. We set up a little gym in his apartment garage. It's just a little 1-car garage, and we just kept training because we were training for the Olympic trials at that point. We had both made the Olympic trials, and so we had some motivation just in that itself, So we were training hard, And yeah, then we were both still training together that whole time. Then we went to nationals/Olympic trials in 2016. And then we both made the Pan Am team from there, which was the true way that the men's team was going to pick their Olympic team. And we all went to that Pan Am's, and it was Kendrick who came in and made the clutch lifts and ended up getting the spot again. And then I think after that, we still trained together some, but then Travis ended up moving to Rhode Island. Then I was training at another gym here in town. And, we had talked about opening up a gym, and like went to a few other places, and like there wasn't, again, there's a few other weightlifting gyms like in the area, but they were pretty far away. There wasn't that, like, I was looking for that weightlifting environment, and I was like, all right, I've got to create this weightlifting environment. So then, I made a business plan, and it wasn't until, I had this business plan for like a year, and I was just kind of waiting and looking for the opportunities. One of the biggest things was finding commercial real estate for the gym. I'd find a spot like, weightlifting gym, you don't need 5,000 square feet, which most warehouse space is. So like the small warehouse spaces were kind of limited. And I found one spot, which was next to a train track. And they were like, no, weightlifting is going to be too loud in here. And I'm like, what? Like, you're next to a train. Like, come on. Like, so that was actually a surprising hurdle to opening up the weightlifting gym. But eventually some doors opened, and, we found a good spot, found the right people to go in with. And, now we're 5 months into the gym, and it's going well.
That's awesome. And before we kind of start talking about that programming and coaching piece and kind of how you're running the gym, I would like to hear about your experiences competing. So maybe your favorite competition moment nationally or internationally, and something that just maybe sticks out in your memory from all of those competitions.
Yeah, let's see. Olympic trials would be definitely the number one. 2016 Olympic trials. Like they put it on like the quality of a World Championships A session. So it was really cool. Like that was a lot of fun. I was in shape for that meet. I think I ended up hitting 341 at that meet, which was still below my best. I got called for a 160 snatch. But otherwise that would have been my best total. So like I was in shape for it. I felt good. I felt confident that I had I was ready to make the Olympic team. So that was a lot of fun going out there and competing against, because in that session, it was just everybody that was in the Olympic trial session. So it starts off with, 56s. I don't know if there's any 56s. There might've just been Derek Johnson as a 62 was the lightest one. But, so you're competing against 62s all the way up to super heavyweights. And there was 16 people in the session. So it was a lot of fun, watching like back and forth, because, you finish your total as an 85, then the super heavyweight still has the opportunity to knock you off the team or, anything like that. So, Travis Cooper was in there, the guy, me and Travis kind of, developed a good relationship over that whole time at Muscle Driver. We lived together for a while. So it was fun. We trained a lot together because a lot of our numbers are really close. Mm-hmm. To be in the next platform over there, to see him doing well too. And then, the stage, there was a big crowd, there was a lot of lights, they really made it a good show. So that one was a lot of fun. Internationally.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I want to hear this. Go ahead.
Internationally, I had made a goal to get a medal. I wanted to medal internationally, and I was pretty close at a few Pan Ams. But for some reason or another, whether like in the beginning, I was just learning how to compete internationally and learning that, there's not a difference between competing internationally and nationally. You're just competing against different people.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need a different mindset. I just needed to go in there and do what I normally did. So I feel like I learned that lesson late. So I kept having that goal to get a medal internationally. And then after the Olympics, I was actually in massage therapy school, so I qualified for universities. And I went to the University World Championships, and I ended up getting a silver medal. And
nice.
I kind of battled it out with this guy from South Korea, who ended up taking the gold. But it was a lot of fun to be battling for the gold medal at an international competition. That one was a lot of fun. Like, I wasn't in the best of shape compared to the Olympic trials or anything, but it was a lot of fun being on an international stage, having the confidence. Like, I knew how to compete on the international stage then. Even though I wasn't in shape, I was ready to go out there and, win that medal.
So kind of flipping that, did you have any competition experiences that, to be kind of blunt, were just awful or kind of really hard to deal with?
Yeah, I think actually my first international competition was definitely a learning experience. I still totaled. I don't remember what I hit. I think I hit a little less than what I think I qualified for the competition with like a 304 as a 77, which nowadays you would never qualify for an senior international competition with the 304 as a 77. It just kind of gives you an idea of how much better weightlifting has gotten. So I don't know. I went out there because I expected, I was like, I'm an international competition. I got to do well. And, it was down in Venezuela or something. And Venezuela's not the nicest place in the middle of summer, especially when you don't have any AC in the room. So it was definitely it was a learning experience. I shared a room with Glenn, and that was, and we didn't have an AC. And so that one, I let certain things get to me, where after that I was like, okay, I just got to be chill. Like, these things don't matter. I just need to, accept that this is how Pan Ams are, and accept that things aren't going to go right at meets, and just deal with it. At that meet, I got beat by people that I knew I should have beat. And that's the one where I was like, all right, that's just annoying. Like, I need to get my mental game figured out for next time. And slowly but surely, I got better.
Okay, so you've had a lot of experiences, and obviously all of these kind of play into how you coach your athletes now. So at the House of Weightlifting, the gym you currently run, I'm kind of interested to kind of dive into your coaching philosophy, maybe how you've been influenced from coaches you've had or people you've talked with, and how you go about programming for your athletes. So that's kind of like a broad question. So however you'd want to break it up.
Yeah. So, kind of starting, I did powerlifting for about 8 years with the same coach. And he was a pretty knowledgeable guy. He trained some pretty good powerlifters back in the day. Of course, he trained a lot of drugged powerlifters, which you train them a little bit different than you train natural powerlifters. But he still had a wealth of knowledge. So I learned a lot from him. And one of the, if you bring it down to its basics, you just have to be realistic. You can't be too too set in stone. Like, the number one thing is, okay, are you getting better?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm getting better. Okay, you're doing something right. Like, are you getting worse? Well, you got to change something. And bringing it down to its basics, like, that's my coaching philosophy. And with that, I'm kind of willing to try a bunch of different things and finding out what works. And then just through trial and error and working with different people, I kind of find out what each athlete kind of adapts well to and what they don't adapt well to. And also being okay with saying, like, passing an athlete up, like, hey, there's another coach out there that might be better for you. Which is the case sometimes. So, like, for example, like, I've got a lot of different influences from a lot of different really good coaches that have very distinct types of programming that they do. And so I'll try, like, completely different styles. Like, some people, like, I call them effort-based programs, which is very much like Glenn's, where it's very self-regulated, how much effort you put into it and how well you adapt to it, which some people do amazing at, and it's really great for, like, pushing someone to get those new PRs. And then I have some other people, like, that does not work at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like they get worse and worse and worse, and, like, being okay with being like, all right, we're not going to keep pushing through this. Like, this isn't working for you. Like, and so then we go on, like, a complete different thing, and I'll try out different types of programs. Like, I've got some influence from Dave Fleming, who's my current coach, who does a lot of percentage programs in a very unique way, like, almost. So Don McCauley does a lot of percentage programs. At least when he worked with me, I don't know. I feel like he's probably changed his coaching programming a little bit since we've worked together, but they might both be percentage type programs, but they're still completely different. So, I just take bits and pieces and I find out what works for an individual athlete. And then we stick with it. And then we go back to that principle. Are you getting better? Yes. All right. Then let's keep going. Don't overthink it. Keep it simple. You're getting better. These are your goals. These are realistic expectations. If you keep this path up, or, if a roadblock comes up, then we got to switch things up. What's interesting too is I coached a lot of people online, and a lot of times, like, I would give people a program and I'd be surprised, like, man, like, I'm surprised that didn't work. And it turns out, like a lot of GPP stuff, this is where I see it the most. People come in to the gym and they train with me, and they'll be doing this GPP program that I had given them and that they were doing on their own. And then they come in and they start doing it, and I'm like, oh no, like, you're using like 50% of the amount of weight. Like, people don't realize that, like, you can go heavy on a rotator cuff exercise, as long as you're healthy and there's no injuries or something, like, mm-hmm. You still have good controlled form and technique, but you don't use those 5-pound dumbbells. Like, you should be using like 20s or 25s. Like, you got to get strong at this stuff. And so some things that's what I've really enjoyed about owning my own gym and being able to work with people in person more, is, like, there's just little things like that don't get, they don't transfer that well over, like, through online coaching. But then once you get in there in person, like, I don't know, it's not that people don't want to work hard. It's sometimes that they don't know exactly how to work hard on something. Like, everybody's got that stereotypical, people do like the I's, Y's, and T's and W's, mm-hmm. and you do it with 5-pound dumbbells because that's how everybody does it. But then, they don't realize that, oh, you can do this completely different and make it 10 times harder and 10 times more effective. I kind of got a little bit off topic, but
no, that was great. It actually leads into kind of what I wanted to touch on now. I noticed that your coaching differs in the sense that it does focus more on those kind of general physical preparedness exercises. You even went out of your way to write a book on it, The Physically Prepared Athlete. So maybe explain how you develop the mindset that those are more important than a lot of people lead on to believe, and then how you implement them into a program.
Yeah, so I've got like this idea coming from powerlifting, and specifically how my coach trained us. And he had influences from, almost two ends of the spectrum, Louis Simmons and Charles Poliquin, and then his own little twist, because he was actually he was a pretty creative guy, so it was kind of cool to see his own twists. And now that I've been in this strength, and I've met Charles and I've met Louis separately, and I see how they do things, and then how my coach took kind of both of their stuff and kind of turned it into his own. And you learn different like little things and creative ways that people get people strong while still following those main principles. But so a lot of it was influence there, and so from his original influence, and then how I made such an easy transition. Like, I think I snatched 137 kilos within the first year of training for weightlifting. I snatched 125 after 6 weeks. So like,
Jeez.
I didn't realize it at the time because I had no respect for those weights then. Mm-hmm. I was deadlifting over 500 pounds easy. So, what's 275 pounds? I'm like, oh, this is light. Why should I be scared of snatching 125? Like, I should be doing a lot more. Like, I was looking at the American records. I was an 85 when I first started, 82.5. And I saw Kendrick's numbers, and I was just like, oh, I can definitely do that. And here I am 8 years later being like, well, I got a little bit more respect for those lifts that Kendrick did as I have experienced heavier weights. But, starting out, I didn't have those reservations. Like, I didn't, which I think was a good thing. That kind of spurred its own progress. But I attributed a lot of that, of course, to being strong. But I also had very few injuries. And really the only major injury I have had has been nerve damage, which was kind of a freak accident, which is not a indicator of not being physically prepared. It was the nerve endings just kind of ripped off my muscle, which is strange. But so I kind of realized, and I see other weightlifters, and I'm like, wow, like these other people, they do not have that. Like, I think one of the reasons I have such good timing and control of my catch is that I have a lot of eccentric control. I can control eccentrics quickly. I can control them slowly, and that comes from doing a lot of exercises with controlled tempos, with pauses, with things here, there, a lot of variety. Where I see, like, one guy that I'm working with right now, he's a swimmer, which they historically have no eccentric strength. It's all concentric. And they can get really, that's their sport specific. But, the bar would just crash on him in the snatch because he would go rock bottom. He wouldn't meet the bar and control it where it was at. So he wouldn't be able to control that 2 or 3 inches of bar drop and then, catch it with ease where, someone that was a little bit faster, maybe like, let's look at, that Colombian, Luis Javier, that's like super fast. He meets that bar in a snatch, but he doesn't like meet it and then drop down. He like meet it and then he stops it and he controls it. That's his ability that's like a quick eccentric strength. I'm getting stuck on this eccentric strength thing because this is what I've been working on with people at the gym. But there's a lot of things like that I saw that weightlifters didn't have because, they only do concentric. They only do snatch. They go up. They go down in squats really quick. They, by the time they finish their workout of snatch, clean and jerk, front squat, pulls, like, they didn't have any strength to go do, like, slow eccentric one leg work. Or, if they did do it, they would be like, oh, let me go do this real quick. and they would be super distracted and they wouldn't work really hard at it because, I mean, I don't blame them. They just trained really hard for snatch and clean and jerk. They don't have any energy to do that other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I just saw that hole in weightlifters, and I thought that, you know, people's career could be a lot longer. They could do it a lot safer, and they could have a lot more control of their lifts. And by having more control and more work capacity and work density, they'd be able to hit more lifts at higher percentages. And more lifts at higher percentages is what really yields results. Whereas some countries, they are able to do that through, of course, they have good programming, but there's also PEDs that help them do that. Like, PEDs don't make you really strong. They make you be able to recover and be able to hit more lifts at higher percentages more often. And that technique rehearsal and that being familiar with those weights is really what makes them strong, as opposed to the PEDs. And so in a way, in the United States, we're trying to do other things. Not saying that these other countries don't do GPP too, but I do see it as the whole in weightlifting, that this is something that they can do so that they can hit more lifts. They can recover a little bit better. They can hit higher percentages more often. And then again, this doesn't mean, you know, maxing out all the time. This just means that, you know, they have more work capacity and work density, and that's what will really make them better.
So you kind of alluded to it before, talk about like single leg work. What are some examples of these exercises that you would use in maybe like a typical program? So like if you had someone come in, obviously the first program you develop is going to be like a test program. Do you have any go-to exercises that you see work normally across the board?
You know, it all depends on the person. You know, every once in a while, like let's say you got your generic weightlifter, CrossFitter that's turned into a weightlifter. They don't know how to use their hamstrings as knee flexors. Like they have no, like, there's nothing in CrossFit that flexes the knee to work the hamstring. They do back extensions. They have glute ham devices, but they don't do glute ham raises. They do back extensions. They do deadlifts. They're more of those complex, like, I don't know, and rightfully so. They are more demanding exercises, so they're better for like that Metcon and burning calories crap. But you know, they're not developing their hamstrings evenly as hip extensors and knee flexors. So I do a lot of knee flexion work. Whether like it's a glute ham raise, which is a little bit more advanced, you know, a lot of people, or if they're a heavyweight, they just can't do glute ham raises. So I do a lot of dumbbell hamstring curls. I wouldn't mind getting a little like a prone hamstring curl machine, which was surprising. One of the things that I actually saw when I was in Venezuela was hamstring curl machines. Like they had all of their barbells and machines, and then they had a hamstring curl machine. You go to a weightlifting gym in the United States, you don't see hamstring curl machines. But I think that's a big one, you know, hamstring development and, you know, knee flexion.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, James.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, that's like the strength weakness. But as far as the strength and balance, you know, a lot of people are, they get the imbalance in the split jerk just because it's a one leg dominant. So I do a lot of stuff to correct the split jerk imbalances as far as like strengthening the quads and one leg stuff.
Okay, so that's really interesting. I actually kind of noticed that, like, when you split jerk enough, you tend to, I don't know if in the dip and drive, you tend to almost favor that leg and kind of drift a little bit, and you can kind of notice that imbalance.
Yeah.
But as far as, like, exercises that weightlifters should avoid, do you think there are any exercises that are maybe overrated or that aren't really necessary that you see a lot of people doing or performing?
Burpees. Those are just stupid. What bothers me about burpees is that they're a pure work exercise. There's no benefit. It's just for the fact of doing burpees. I mean, unless you're old and you need to like learn how to like stand up from being on the ground. Like I could see that perspective, but from a fitness thing or anything like that, I hate burpees. But really, I mean, on the other end of the spectrum, I mean, not really. I mean, sometimes, like, I think if you depend on certain exercises too much, here, I'll give you an example. So one of the people that have influenced my programming would have been Charles Poliquin. And Charles Poliquin in himself, he's just a super salesperson. So he finds his one thing to pick on, and then he just really dials in and picks on it. But he hates like glute bridges. And he writes this stuff in his articles sometimes. And I chuckle at it because I put glute bridges in my book and I use them. And he's like, you ever see any strong weightlifters using glute bridges? No, because they're stupid. Like he calls it some like moronic exercise. And he brings some good points, like, putting a bar across your hips and throwing 700 pounds on it. Your hips aren't designed to hold 700 pounds that way. And it's most likely going to lead to some type of overuse injury for your back. But how I use them is I use them at lighter loads as like the first progression. Like that's the first thing that they do so that they can learn to feel their glutes. Once they feel their glutes, like, okay, they're making that brain muscle connection. They kind of understand it. And then we slowly progress into more complex movements that also, we're kind of teaching them. So what I like to do a lot of times people will pull and they won't know how to use their glutes and quads to pick up the bar off the floor. They'll rely on the back. And so we'll do a deficit and we'll pick the bar up half an inch off the floor. Most people pick it up 6 inches because they don't even realize how low half an inch is because they have no control over their glutes in that position. So like we'll do glute bridges with some weight. We'll never do them long enough to where they can get ridiculously heavy. Most people that I train, even like the stronger guys, we get up to like 70 kilos and then like that's it. Then we go on to the next exercise. They could get stronger and they could go up to doing 500 pounds, but I don't really like. That's the time that I think that they're going to start losing the benefit and they're going to be adapting. They've adapted to the good things of that exercise already. If they kept doing it more and more and more, they'll start adapting to the bad things of that exercise, which would be, the stress on the back, the weird movement pattern. When do you actually do that movement pattern aside from having sex, I guess? It's not a great athletic movement pattern. So there's not a whole lot of use for it beyond that point. So I think going back to the final point, knowing when to use an exercise and when to stop using an exercise is important. And especially for GPP stuff, it's all about variety. It's about getting new stimulus because you're trying to use it to get better at weightlifting. So weightlifting is the specific, and all the GPP is all the general stuff. Like you don't have to get to doing 700 pounds on a hip thrust in order to snatch your goal weight. Like, so I don't know, knowing when to throw an exercise out and when to keep it in is, I think, the important thing versus what exercises.
Right. I think that's a great point you made earlier about the glute bridge, because a lot of people want to dive into the very complex movements and like a squat or a snatch or a clean, and they are just that complex. And the act of doing them doesn't help you develop that almost that like singular muscular awareness. So like the glutes, for example, like doing snatches won't help you feel your glutes better or develop an awareness of where they're at and how they're working. It almost is helpful to regress it. And that's actually a really smart approach to doing it. Now, as far as like the questions, I kind of had the questions about programming and stuff, kind of finish those up. The next section, just a few that are a little more philosophical and abstract that I like to ask everyone that kind of comes on the show.
Nice.
So the first one, besides the physical improvement, so getting stronger and more muscular, do you think it would be useful for everyone to resistance train? And what has strength training or resistance training done for you in that sense?
I just because of the lifestyle that I lead, I am around people who all do strength training, resistance training, or athletic type stuff. But I have met people and I just don't travel in the same circles. Um, and after I meet them and I spend maybe a couple days with them, I realize wow, they would not do good in the gym. This is their spot, and I don't know. I'll go on the complete opposite. They're I don't know, like a yogi. Sometimes super intense yogis, they don't mix. So here's a good example. So I went into I did massage therapy school, and I became a massage therapist because I went over to China and they all had therapists. And I was like, all right, we got to start having more massage therapy for weightlifters over here, and I kind of got into that. But over here, you get a lot of, you get into some of that weird Chinese medicine and like chakras and stuff, which, from my standpoint, that's not my thing. I'm not a big I'm not a big Reiki massage type person. I feel like I would just be wasting my money. But then I see that I've met the people that are super into it, and that's them. And I can see that that's a healthy. I know they're healthy. You can you can just tell if someone's healthy or not sometimes, and this is what they do to get healthy. So that kind of opens up your eyes too, to realize that not everybody is there's not one path to being healthy and happy. And based on who you are, sometimes you might just need to be one of those people that sits down, meditates, has candles, doing spiritual Reiki massages. And that's cool. That's their thing. And I think I'm open to that. I know that that's theirs, and they wouldn't do that great with resistance training, and that's all right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think sometimes because we do run in our own circles, you kind of get blinded to the fact that you can develop your character outside of strength training. You don't have to just be lugging weight around in the gym to become a better person. You can get that with running or cycling or anything that kind of challenges you in that sense. But as far as your experiences with strength training, do you feel like it's obviously you've gotten a lot better as an athlete, but outside of that, do you feel like it's helped you in any other ways?
It's always just been something that I've always just been consistent at, and I've always enjoyed. And so I did it. And, I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg or if whether I had this before that, but I'm very much practical in the sense that, if something makes sense to me, then I'm going to do it. There's no dilemmas there. And I guess weightlifting in one of those senses is I feel good weightlifting. I enjoy being strong. I enjoy picking up heavy things, and I enjoy the process. So I do it. So I don't know, maybe in a way it's the decisiveness of it, the commitment, with, this bring it down to one individual lift, the commitment of doing a snatch. There's no hesitation. You have to believe that you're going to do it. And I kind of carry that over into other things, for example, we just sold our house and moved into a fifth wheel camper. Just because it was a better decision for our family. The kids, we didn't need that big, huge 2-story house. Now we've got a smaller camper. The kids are all close together. They, just that family connection made sense. So we decided, I don't know, on a Friday, and by the next week we had a camper, and now 1 month later we had sold the house. And it was there's just no hesitation. We knew that what the right decision was, and we're all right, let's do it. And, I see myself making a lot of those same decisions in weightlifting. So I don't know if weightlifting kind of developed that that attribute, or if I just had it before, and that's why I was drawn and did well in weightlifting. So it's hard to say.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and I've had this discussion before where people always wonder if you got into weight training or weightlifting because your personality was a certain way, or it developed your personality into a certain way. And for you, I mean, just hearing kind of your come up, it sounded like you already had a lot of these character traits and just seemed, determined, committed. But that's just from me talking to you for an hour. And the next question is, what is the worst mistake you've made as an athlete? And how would you advise other people avoid making that same mistake?
So I think the worst mistake I'd made. If some of you all know, I was coached by Glenn, and Glenn was a great coach. But then he had his stroke. My coach-athlete relationship with Glenn was like it was perfect. I was making progress. We did great together in competition. And then he had a stroke, and he wasn't 100%. He, then I started working with some other coaches, and I kind of developed a little bit of a mistrust with different coaches, different competition coaches. So like we would go to an international competition and Glenn wouldn't be there because of course Glenn wouldn't be able to do it didn't make sense for him to go because he couldn't read the cards at the time because his eyesight was bad. So I'd be working with these other coaches that I didn't necessarily know. And I developed a mistrust in other coaches because, I'd seen them and I'd seen some of the mistakes, and I've definitely made mistakes coaching in competition. I made a big one where I cost one of my teammates a gold medal, and like that was a huge learning lesson because I thought he was lighter, and he tied, and he lost on body weight because I chose the wrong weight. And I've had a few things like that, and then I developed this like super trust and like discomfort in the back room where I needed to be in control. And that was a problem. Like I couldn't, like I wouldn't let it go. Like I had to be in control in the back room. And then once I kind of realized that, I had to go and I had to find the coach that would work well for me. Glenn was perfect; it worked great. But then, just after the stroke, and I think he's better now. Like he's got his vision back. So like, if like I would actually probably trust coach to coach me in the back room now. But right after that stroke, like from 2000, I think he had it in December of 2013. To the Olympic trials, I had to get somebody else to coach me as far as like counting numbers and stuff. And through that process, I developed that mistrust of even the national level coaches, like when I went to international competitions for one reason or another. But then once I started working with the next coach, which was Dave Fleming, like I realized that, and I was like, all right, I need to hand these controls over to you. Like I trusted that he was good in competition. And then I kind of let that responsibility go and put it in the coach's hands. So, kind of putting a little bit of trust. And I found somebody that I thought was competent. And then I let it go. And then I started making a lot better progress.
Well, that's really interesting.
At least in competition.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear. So, James, there's one more question left, and then we'll kind of get with the plugs. But as far as your training and where you're headed now, what are your plans for the next 2 years leading up to 2020?
Well, I took about a month off of training, which is the most time I'd ever taken off of training. I started training again yesterday. I don't know if this dates your podcast, but I don't know when you release them, but that was the most time I'd ever taken off. So I, it was kind of a nice break, kind of a refresh, let the body heal. The shoulder still wasn't 100%. I was having some other aches and pains. And now I'm coming back with kind of a fresh outlook. My body feels good. And now I'm going to start training for the American Open in December. And really, to start off with, the selection procedures and the weight classes, there are too many unknowns for me right now to say 100%. So right now I'm just going. and I'm having fun, and I'm getting to a point where I'll be prepared once all more of that information comes out to make those decisions. So that's really what it's kind of looking like. It's as far as making an Olympic team in 2020, the selection procedures are all sorts of different, which is, I mean, you don't want, I'm sure you don't, that could be a podcast on its own about the selection procedures, but yeah, we just, I got to make certain international meets, and we'll cross that bridge there. If I'm ready for it, I'm ready for it. If I'm not, I'm not. I'll still try to compete internationally and do well.
Awesome. And I'm sure we all look forward to seeing your training and watching you back on the competition stage. So, there are a lot of things that we could talk about with the changes that are coming. So we'll kind of leave that aside. So the last question is kind of the big one. It's sort of the climax of the podcast. What is one thing that people can do each day to better their life?
Oh, it's just like that. It's like Kaizen. What's it? The small daily improvements over a long period, yield the big results. I think that in itself is your answer. I mean, just start doing something that's a small daily improvement, and there you go. Like that's what it's all about. You just got to progress. I mean, you bring it back to strength training. The number one principle: are you getting better? Okay. You're on the right path. You're doing those small daily improvements. Like, just keep doing it. Just do those little things. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's progressing. Just look at things and decide. Hey, is this helping me? Yes. All right, let's keep doing it. Oh, is this not helping me? All right, I don't have to do that anymore. Like, that's. I think that goes really far.
Yeah, I mean that's. It's so simple, but yet so effective. And I think people assume PRs are just for the gym, but I mean, I'm trying to PR in everything. I mean, how well I, complete some project for school, or how well I, I don't know, clean the car or whatever. Just try and PR it a little bit more than I did last time, and it adds up. And it kind of going along with your coaching philosophy. Is it getting better? If it's getting better, keep doing it. So James, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. Now, as far as contact information, I know you have the gym and you have your coaching services. Where can people find that information and then reach out to you if they want to get in contact?
Nice. Thanks, man. So on Instagram, either my gym page is at House of Weightlifting, or my personal page, James Tatum USA. You could message me on there. I'm pretty good about answering messages back on there pretty quick. The website is jamestatumusa.com. And then there's stuff on there about the gym and everything. You can reach me in there. Right now, we are trying. So I am kind of shifting to, committing to coaching more people. Like, I've got one guy that's going to nationals this year. I'm trying to coach more and more people to get to nationals. I've got a couple other people that are really close to it. So we're trying to grow our team kind of. So if you're in the Charlotte area and you want to come train at the gym, hit me up, let me know. Or we do a few people on remote coaching. And we are all part of East Coast Gold too, the whole House of Weightlifting. So we've kind of in that community as well. So if you guys are looking for a coach and you want to try you want to try out a different coach, let me know, and we can definitely work together. Yeah, I think those are the best places. The social media, man. Those are the easiest ways to get to me.
Awesome. And James, I mean, I love your philosophy. I love what you're doing, and I feel like you'd be a great fit for someone that's looking for a coach to get them, to be the best weightlifter that they can be. So, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it, and I hope our listeners enjoyed the show as much as I did. Thanks again, James.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on.
No problem, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.